I'm calling out YouTube videos with incorrect information about visiting Washington, D.C. Specifically, I'm calling out my own Trip Hacks DC videos. Because the truth is, a lot has changed over the past few years. Not just here in D.C., but anywhere that you plan to travel. And the oldest Trip Hacks DC YouTube videos are now over 6 years old. Some information is just old, out of date, or no longer accurate. But I still think it's worth calling out, because whether you're watching my videos, travel vlogs, or guides made by someone else, we've now entered an era where you have to double check and verify that the information you've found is still valid. To help save you a little bit of time, I went back through my catalog of videos and found some things that are no longer up to date. By the way, hello, my name is Rob. I'm a tour guide and the founder of Trip Hacks DC Tours. On this channel, I share my best tips, tricks, and hacks for visitors who want to explore Washington, D.C. And I'm curious to know which of these surprises you the most. So after you're done watching the video, leave a comment down there and let me know. Let's start with literally the first video ever published on this channel, apps to download for your trip. Unfortunately, several apps I recommended in that video, like the Smithsonian app and the National Mall app, no longer exist. I also recommended an app called City Mapper in that video, although honestly, I personally now use Google Maps about 99% of the time. I think at the time, City Mapper had a lot of features that Google Maps didn't, but that Google Maps has since adopted a lot of them. I've also heard that Apple Maps is now quite good and definitely improved since I published that original video. I also no longer personally use Yelp, as I think Google Maps is now the superior option for finding restaurants and places to go and to read and write reviews. And finally, Metro Hero no longer exists as a standalone app, but you can use the browser-based version of Metro Hero, and I recently published a short video demonstrating exactly how. Next, let's go to my museum tips video from 2017, where I said this. Use the back doors. Most museums on the National Mall have 2 entrances. Going through the non-bus door doesn't guarantee that you won't have to wait in a line, but it does reduce the risk that you'll get stuck behind a huge group. I think this was a great tip at the time, because backups at the metal detectors could get really long, especially during 8th grade field trip season. But many museums now have new metal detectors that are much more efficient and honestly a big improvement. So I wouldn't stress out about which door to use. In another video from 2017, my tips for seeing the monuments and memorials, I said, every local knows that it's infinitely better to see the monuments and memorials after dark at night than it is during the day. I have changed my opinion about this since I published that video. In fact, I even made an entire dedicated update video on this topic. But the gist of it is, seeing the monuments after dark is a great experience. I've done it many times, but it's also logistically challenging to do it in the summer when the days are long and it doesn't get dark until after 9 o'clock. But summer is the busiest time in DC for tourism, especially families with school-aged kids. So see the monuments whenever you can, and check out my updated video for my new advice on how to navigate seeing them after dark. In my video about the best and worst ways of getting around DC, I mentioned electric mopeds and said this. If you're visiting from out of town, don't really know your way around, and aren't that familiar with the city, I think this could be a potentially dangerous situation. Well, these things no longer exist, so you don't have to worry about them anymore. But everything else I mentioned in the video still is an option, and I highly recommend watching that video so you know all of the various ways that you have to get around. Next, let's go to my Things to Do on Christmas Day video, where I recommended the U.S. Botanic Gardens, which hosts the awesome Season's Greetings exhibit. However, I will warn that on Christmas Day, it gets pretty crowded, because for everybody who's out looking for something to do, this is pretty much all they've got. Unfortunately, this video was made pre-COVID, and it seems that the U.S. Botanic Garden is no longer opening on Christmas Day. Or at least they haven't been the past several years. Obviously, I can't predict the future, So if you're going to be in DC on Christmas Day, double and triple check all of the sites that you want to go to verify that they'll be open. Next, let's go to my video where I demonstrated how to get from BWI Airport to Union Station for cheap using the MARC commuter train. This is still the cheapest way to get from BWI Airport to DC. But how you buy the tickets has changed slightly. 5 years ago, when I made this video, you purchased MARC tickets from the blue Amtrak ticket machines. Now, MARC has its own dedicated ticket machine that I actually think is a bit easier to use. So look for the big blue and orange machines with the MARC logo. I do plan to eventually make an updated BWI to DC video. I just haven't flown out of BWI Airport in a while and haven't had a chance to record one. Staying on the topic of transportation, in my original Metro do's and don'ts video, I said,
do get a SmarTrip card. This used to be a suggestion, but now it's a requirement.
The context here is important. I recorded that video only about 1 year after Metro discontinued paper fare cards. I figured that people who had visited DC in the past might still have a paper fare card that they planned to bring back. And I needed everyone to know that paper fare cards no longer work and you now must buy a plastic SmarTrip card. But even that advice is now out of date because now you can use a plastic SmarTrip card or Apple Pay or Google Pay. And even though I personally think a plastic SmarTrip card is the best option for many people, it's not the only option. Before we go on, I just want to say again that the reason I'm making this video is because in travel and tourism, things are constantly changing. And because I live and work here in DC, I like to think I have a pretty good pulse on what's going on. The best way to always make sure you have the freshest, most up-to-date information is by watching my tourism update videos. I'll leave a link to a playlist in the description that has all of them in one place. And if you aren't already subscribed, what are you waiting for? Make sure to do that so you don't miss any tourism update videos in the future. Now, let's rewatch a bit of my food courts video.
Eat at National Place. This food court is located at 13th and F Streets Northwest, about a block from the Metro Center station.
This one might be one of my worst timed videos of all time. I published it right before COVID, and food courts were hit especially hard by COVID. Between white-collar office workers working from home and 8th grade field trips being canceled for several years, it was not a good time for food courts. The food court I mentioned in that clip, Eat at National Place, doesn't even exist anymore. Food courts have their place. They're fine for quick and easy food. Just don't expect them to look like what you saw in that video. Now, let's talk about e-scooters. In my video demonstrating how to use them, I said,
you can't end your trip outside of the company's service area. And the National Mall is not part of the service areas.
When scooters first came on the scene, they were basically banned from the National Mall. Now, you can legally end a scooter ride on the mall, but only in very specific geographic locations, which you can find by using the scooter company's app. I don't personally ride e-scooters, but if you plan to, make sure to have a plan for where you're going to end your rides. Now, back in my video about Metro fares, I described the fare structure like this.
What you pay depends on how far you travel and whether it's peak time or not. The longer the distance, the higher the fare.
And that's still true for the most part. But one nice thing that's happened over the past couple of years is that Metro has introduced flat fares on weekends and weekdays after 9:30 p.m. So if you start your Metro ride on a weekday after 9:30 p.m. or any time on Saturday or Sunday, you can go from any station to any other station for only $2. And that, I think, is one of the best deals in town. Let's head up to the National Zoo, where in my Zoo Tips video, I said, in 2022, there are actually only 3 zoos in the United States that have giant pandas. Unfortunately, this is no longer accurate since the Memphis Zoo recently lost their pandas. And even worse news is that unless an agreement is reached soon, the pandas at the National Zoo here in DC are scheduled to return to China in December 2023. But no matter what happens to the pandas, the National Zoo is still a fantastic free zoo. So make sure to watch my Zoo Tips video if you plan to visit. Just go ahead and click or tap right over here to watch it next. Enjoy your trip.